I was used to giving a pitch like a spreadsheet. This A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And when you're giving a pitch to investors, no, they're not looking for that. They want a story. They want to hear emotional connection. They want to hear growth path and stuff that are more soft. And I found out about myself that I can actually go there as well, not just be the A, B, C, D guy.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI and the Future of Work, episode 290. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact. According to a research summary by Julia Barnett, a PhD student at Northwestern University, there have been 884 academic papers published recently in the generative audio domain. Julia's analysis specifically looks at the ethical implications of generative audio. Here are a few of her conclusions. Less than 10% of the papers discuss any potential negative impacts, despite the serious ethical implications raised, such as the potential for fraud, deepfakes, and copyright infringement. Number two, the creators of some high-profile generative audio models, including OpenAI, announced they would not release them publicly due to the strong potential for misuse, but sadly they are in the minority. Insight 3, the paper catalogs ethical considerations yet to be addressed by AI vendors and researchers, including issues with authenticity, ownership, deepfakes, and their ability to rapidly spread misinformation. I've said before that we are entering a post-truth era. Be prepared to question your sources. Let's use this important moment in history to become more rigorous in our assessment of content integrity. Generative AI is not an excuse to lazily accept any so-called facts posing as truth. And we'll continue unpacking these themes in future episodes. And of course, we will link to the full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to today's conversation, Emil Winebrand, the CEO and co-founder of insoundz, is a trailblazer in the AI and audio technology industry. With a master's in engineering from Tel Aviv University, Emil began his career deeply immersed in the world of tech. His journey took a significant turn after a decade of service in the elite intelligence technology unit of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, where he developed an interest in AI, particularly for audio enhancement. Under Emil's leadership, insoundz has emerged as a force in generative AI for audio technology, changing how we experience sound. His passion led to the development of insoundz flagship product, Revive, which aims to transform any recording into studio quality sound. I've used Revive. It is amazing. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Emil's also recognized for leading award-winning engineering teams across various domains, from electro-optics to algorithm development. And without further ado, Emil, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI and the Future of Work. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and it got you passionate about audio engineering.
Hey, Dan, nice to meet you. Actually, AI, I stumbled it a very long time ago, specifically neural networks and stuff like that when I was 13, 14 years old. That's before it became a thing. Instantly fascinated me. I asked my mom to buy me a book about neural networks when I was 13, and I really tried to read it, tried to write some of the code. I was dumbfounded by what it can do, the fact that you can make software codes that imitate human thinking. That was a big thing for me. Years came by, I studied my bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering. And I actually, without disclosing my age, I actually asked one professor in an image processing course. He was teaching all those kind of stuff. Hey, how to detect chairs in an image and stuff like that. And I asked him, hey, I read about this AI thing and machine learning and neural networks. And it really, I remember till this day said, no, that's not working. That's not going to work. Stick with the classical signal processing. 10 years go by and the world has changed. So I remember that vividly. But in any case, I studied my master's degree. Then I joined the IDF. I actually joined it as an engineer in intelligence corp, where intelligence do intelligence stuff. So I actually encountered lots of audio issues. It was insane how many decisions were made on half pieces of words that you can capture, you understand, and how bad decisions were made. Actually, strategically bad decisions for a country can be made because of bad audio. And I kind of immersed myself in the whole signal intelligence stuff. A lot of it had to do with audio. And I did a lot of electro-optics, algorithms in the audio. I did a lot of stuff through those 10 years. It was an amazing time. And I actually won a couple of awards. One of them was a really prestigious award for creative thinking by the head of the intelligence corp in Israel. And when I got out of the army for a period for Microsoft, but really my passion was AI and how to connect that with audio. I always thought that audio is so fundamental to our lives and that it's neglected in the wake of all the video and imagery stuff. And that was always kind of my passion.
So I mentioned I went through the demo that's on the insoundz website for Revive, and it's mind-blowing. I felt like it's the difference between if you're looking through a dirty windshield in a car, and then you can't see anything, and then it's covered in mud, and then you take some Windex and you wipe away the mud, and all of a sudden you can see what's ahead of you. The audio quality is crystal clear after it's been cleaned up. Maybe just so our audience gets a sense of what Revive does, take a simple use case, say podcasting. What might insoundz do or Revive do to change how we listen to podcasts?
Yeah, great question. So if I can connect with how you started the podcast about real versus fake and all the ethical issues that have to do with audio. So imagine what Revive does is actually it's an AI that speaks for you. What does it mean? Imagine Siri. You can write some text, it will speak, right? But won't speak with your voice. It will not convey any emotions, and it will not be really aligned with you. So the trick here is split into two. One part is listening, and the other part is speaking. And when you regenerate audio from scratch, you actually generate something that is pure, is clean, doesn't have any artifacts, but it may lose some of your vocal minutes. So the way we work is actually mix part of the real audio with the fake audio. So you get something that sounds exactly like you. It is fundamentally you, but it's surrounded by background singers, if you want to call it, like in a show, that really elevates that to a really high level of performance. So you always get studio quality recording. Everything that was not perfect in the original voice, I don't know, some frequencies were too reverby, too noisy or something, it will regenerate them from scratch. So that's how you get a real mix of you and a little bit around you that makes it sound amazing.
Sounds a little bit like what we can now, and it's now becoming commonplace for editing images with AI, where we can infer parts of the image that don't exist, or we can crop out things based on kind of a pattern matching at the pixel level. It feels a little bit like Revive is doing that for audio. Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, it is a fair analogy. Basically, if you look at an image, like our mind can interpolate the missing parts. Same thing with audio. Our mind is, and I'm taking our mind as a kind of as a parable to an AI, what an AI can do. So if you miss some frequencies or some stuff is missing in the audio, you can actually train the AI, fill in the gaps that will be missing frequencies, missing stuff in the time domain as well, and different characters of audio that it can really complete.
So the first few hundred episodes of this podcast, I'm not too proud to admit, I hand engineered the audio using Audacity. And I always thought to myself, literally after a few hundred episode edits, why can't I automate what I'm doing? Because it's real work it's thought work. You have to zoom in on the sound waves to be able to identify the stop words and, the static and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, all I was doing is essentially pattern matching, as one human. And I was thinking it's such a logical problem for AI and machine learning to solve. Is that, can we automate the work of, like what I was doing to edit podcasts? Is that a good potential use of Revive?
Sorry. Yeah, it is actually the way we look at it. The way to basically explain the value proposition of Revive is that Revive is an AI model that runs on a cloud, on customer's cloud service, edge device, or on-prem. But really what it does is if you have 1 hour of, I don't know, content of audio, so typically you would hire an audio engineer. It will take him about three hours to do 1 hour of audio, and it will cost you about $300. And the result is, varying. It can be great, and then it can be the best you can do in 3 hours. With Revive basically running in your background, you do it for $1 in 1 second, and the result is always amazing. That's the real value proposition. Have your audio engineer as part of your platform.
But I have to challenge you on that, because the input that feeds the AI model, at some level, it's human annotated audio, right? So it will only be as good as the best audio engineer and as good as the quality of the data that the model's been trained on.
The way it's not annotated, that's the trick here. So imagine like human recordings possible that you have in the world made in studio. And now you add on top of it the physics that stands between the human voice and the recording device. Then you have the transfer, the room reverb, additional noise, maybe compression, stuff like that. So the way we approach the training is that we have super high quality initial audio. Then we pass it through physics. We call it the physics layer, which is random and has lots of physics that we cue. Adding on top of that different noises, different effects. Even me rotating my head is physics. It changes the audio. And then you have the degraded audio, and you have the regional kind of the best target you can aim for. And you have them too as part of the training process. So it's not an image that you need to really, really annotate a lot and work around it a lot. We started with really high quality initially. So that's where we train the AI to starting from the noisy one and getting to that high quality, but we have them both.
There are always layers of ethics to be unpacked when we're using AI to make automated decisions. And in the case of audio engineering, I found just anecdotally from my own work editing the podcast, oftentimes the waveforms in the sound, it's easy for speakers, let's say, who maybe aren't as articulate, or they have a softer voice, or they have an accent. The patterns in the waves that are actually humans talking can look like background noise or static. And one of my concerns here is that the AI is unintentionally eliminating good content from a human voice that might be confused with noise because maybe they have an accent or they speak more softly or something like that. How do we think about potentially producing biased output based on the model getting confused by natural patterns in human speech?
That is actually a very profound question, Dan. I'll try to unpack it because we really dealt with a lot of those issues. So first of all, a lot of emotional speech, what we call it in insoundz, which may be whispering or crying or stuff that they don't come often in content. They really can become and transform. Worst case scenario, the AI can transform into something else. Best case scenario, it erases that. So we actually found out that the AI does that. And even worse, in silent parts, if you really amplify that part, you could actually hear the AI whispering words. That was mind-boggling. And we said, okay, there's an issue here. And the way we approached it is we created we call it real-world data set, which means that every AI that we train goes through processes a real-world data set. It's actual recording of different scenarios in the world, about hundreds of those. And we have actual sound engineers that review every part of this, try to understand if there are parts of the word, we call it, again, emotional speech is erased. If something is added, it's a very meticulous job that as part of each release, a sound engineer actually does. And by the way, it can seem a little bit tedious, but actually from that work, we learned a lot back and we took a lot back to the research. A lot of those effects are actually already reduced at research. We don't encounter them as much today because we have protections as part of our AI training. We look for those effects and we put more weight to them to remove them. But actually, every release is reviewed by people.
The Revive service, every minute fed to Revive is reviewed by a human?
Sorry. No, just before a release, we pass specific audio files, that real world data set, we call it. We pass that through the AI, and then the result is being reviewed by a human, and then we let it be. But that's
the training data.
Yeah, it's you don't train on that. That's a separate data that the AI never sees during training time. But yeah, you can call it part of training.
Cross-validation as a technique.
Yeah.
So let me test one of my assumptions. So you mentioned early on that there's the listening component and the speaking component. And then something you mentioned that the AI could introduce like whispering into the cleaned up content. So is the AI from Revive, is it actually generating synthetically some of the voice that would be part of the cleaned up audio?
Yes, correct. It's a mix of the real audio and the generated one.
And the services that I've used that are able to synthetically generate audio, they may be insoundz competitors, I'm not sure, but they require some amount of training data using that speaker's voice. But I thought that wasn't required by Revive, because I thought that mostly what Revive was doing was not synthetically generating voice, just removing noise. But maybe that's a naive understanding. Clarify my understanding there.
So we train the Revive to imitate your original voice the minute you start speaking. So you really do a lot of generalization ahead of time. So it's not trained for a specific person, but it trains on a huge amount of various speakers, male, female, children, different accents, different intonations, stuff like that, and really train in situ live, imitate your voice. So really, it's regenerating things from scratch, and then mix it with the original voice. So you get a kind of a mix, if it makes sense.
And that includes multiple voices, multiple speakers in a single audio file?
Yeah. It is limited to right now to 3, if I recall correctly, 3 persons speaking simultaneously. But, it's just customization.
And because it's just looking at wave patterns, does that mean it should be equally accurate across all languages?
Yes and no. So actually, we started off obviously working on English. Then we tried it here back in Tel Aviv in Israel, and some letters didn't really go through. It actually broke them totally. My understanding is that it learns some of the rules of when you use words or certain types of expressions that it has to see that, in combination with the rest of the word. So that's a long answer.
That makes sense.
Yes, no.
Yeah, correct my statement. Because it hasn't been trained on all languages equally, it isn't able to detect all languages equally. Whatever languages are most represented in the training data is where it will be most accurate.
Yeah, that's correct.
I mentioned in the opener the fun fact about some of the ethical considerations, 884 papers recently published about the ethics of generative audio. How do you think about the responsibility of insoundz for the potential misuse of the tool, whether it's for deep fakes, you can imagine all the different, things, political campaigns, et cetera. Who should be responsible if Revive is used to do, nefarious kinds of acts?
I would answer in maybe twofold. One is insoundz specifically is not giving anyone the tools to change the voice. It actually wants to recreate your voice. So if anyone wants to use Revive to change anyone's voice, it's literally impossible. That's not the way we train it. So we try to avoid that kind of nefarious side of things by taking a whole different approach, saying, no, it's your voice. We're enhancing your voice. It's never going to be somebody else's. The other thing is more a philosophical answer. I think we need to fight that with a higher level of technology, more sophisticated level of technology. What I'm literally saying is that, okay, you have AI, which has capability of certain complexity, but it is never able to, for example, decipher encryption. Encryption has mathematically stronger complexity than any type of AI can decipher. So our approach in insoundz is to embed a watermark in the audio. That means anyone who uses Revive and signed in and paid, and he's a signed user, can always check if that piece of audio was created by insoundz. And this watermark survives all typical audio processing, whatever. But what it doesn't do, if you regenerate that, try to do fake, then the key signature is getting lost. So actually, this is our approach. This is the way we're aiming, and we're about to launch that product as part of every Revive model that is going into the public.
I've asked that question a lot of times, and that is the most satisfying answer I've received. I hope that every generative audio technology is required to do that. It sounds like you did it unsolicited, or even before it's required, but it's good ethical leadership on the part of insoundz.
Thank you, Dan.
So the adjacent use case is once insoundz can synthetically understand or regenerate my voice, I could feed it a script, text, and it could then obviously record that in my synthetically generated voice. And I think a lot of the technologies that are doing things similar to insoundz are doing exactly that, which introduces a ton of additional ethical issues. Is that a use case that you've considered? Because certainly it's commercially, it must be interesting to pursue that one.
It is interesting. The one thing that I think is being lost there is that from text, you cannot really deduct the emotional state of the speaker. Can you say, I'm relaxed? Can you say, I'm excited? And these parts are super important as part of our communication. I think they're being a little bit lost. They're good as a gap fillers sometimes, but like having a full engaging conversation with humans, I think it's missing. So I think we're at insoundz trying to get to that audio to audio domain without really going through text, because we believe in human to human communication. We believe in making it better, reducing the amount of effort needed to make a communication better. By the way, communication can be actual Zoom call, but content, music, everything is communication. So we want to make everything better, not necessarily create that additional layer of, text to speech. That's not really that's not the way we think about insoundz.
So last season on the podcast, we had a great founder from Tel Aviv, a gentleman named Daniel Marcus, who was previously the CTO of Waze, which was acquired by Google. And he's now the CEO of a company called April, using AI for tax filing in the United States. Interesting use case for a member of 8200 from the IDF, but that's where his passion is these days. And I asked him this question, and I'd love to get your answer. I said, what's special about the tech ecosystem in Tel Aviv that made it easier for him to build that company? Now, his second company, but be a serial entrepreneur in Tel Aviv that maybe the Western world, maybe Silicon Valley doesn't get it, other than just knowing that there's some kind of pixie dust in Israel that has generated so many amazing companies. What would you say is unique about that tech ecosystem?
I actually don't think it starts from tech. I think the way that Israeli generally brought up and the amount of freedom and the creativity that is encouraged is very different. I was actually born in Russia, and we immigrated when I was 6 years old. And I've seen both ways of raising children, and the amount of freedom that Israeli kids get and for creativity. And this whole thing goes through the army. The amount of freedom and creativity you get to do in the army is unparalleled. And you get the tools, you get a great education, but you get some freedom. And that gives a lot of motivations to be in the army. You get that type of entrepreneurship education. Here's a problem. Here are a bunch of guys or ladies, doesn't matter. Just go and solve it. And it works. There was a lot of motivation, a lot of entrepreneurship. And, it just goes from the army directly to the industry. You see that. You see the people who did some of this stuff in the army, the way they approach stuff, the amount of, there's a word called chutzpah they have about problems. Okay, there's no problem I can solve. That's you call it pixie dust, but I think it's the way people are brought up here. So that goes through the whole society.
I mentioned a previous company of mine, Big Panda, based in Tel Aviv, had some of the most incredible, obstinate, by the way, engineers that I've ever encountered. Incredibly talented, but clearly, everything you described about the culture of the IDF and the degrees of freedom that it allows you was reflected. And someone once told me to be in the 8200 is you can share more about what that means, but to be in that elite group within the IDF is like getting a degree from MIT, something that's more familiar with people in the United States and maybe other countries. What is it about that experience that is so different when we think about compulsory military service? I guarantee you we're not thinking about an MIT level education, but that is, I think, what you get in the IDF if you're in certain divisions. Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, 100%. I think I have bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering from Tel Aviv University, but my actual education came from the army. That's nowhere near. It is incredible the amount of knowledge, the people you're surrounded by, and the challenges that you get daily just drive you always better, faster, doing everything more efficient, and that's an incredible culture and environment to go through. Yeah, I 100% relate to that. My real education came from the army, not from the university.
So, Emil, we're about out of time. I got to get you off the hot seat, but not before you answer one last question for me. I'm curious about your personal journey. So at 13, you were a nerdy kid who asked for a book about neural networks. I guess that was the most unique bar mitzvah present that anyone's ever received, a book on neural nets. But nonetheless, this journey of being a technologist and being fascinated by audio engineering and physics and math and all the things you've discussed. But now you're the CEO of a high-tech company. What has that transition been like for you personally?
What a deep question. 3 years ago, I would have never thought I'm going to be a CEO of any company. I was more into tech. I was the CTO. I was the CTO of the company. And when I transitioned to CEO, due to circumstances, I wasn't planning on that. I found myself a little bit confused. What is expected? What you need to do? What you need to, so many responsibilities. But what I found is that a lot of the soft skills that you may not get, you're still able to learn them at later age. And I'm surrounded by amazing people that, like, even giving a pitch, what exactly is a person on the other side is looking for? I was used to giving a pitch like a spreadsheet. This A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And when you're giving a pitch to investors, no, they're not looking for that. They want to hear. They want a story. They want to hear emotional connection. They want to hear growth path and stuff that are more soft. And I found out about myself that I can actually go there as well, not just be the A, B, C, D guy, not just everything's bullets. So that's the cool part for me. I'm happy to have this opportunity.
What's the next stage of your personal journey? Where do you feel like you have still opportunities to grow?
I believe that I want to scale insoundz. I want to really make it the SaaS solution for audio for business. So I want it to be big. I want to run a huge company, and I want to really make a dent on the audio world. I think we're stuck in the 90s where there was one company that was, doing all the audio, kind of the top audio quality, that's Dolby. And I think it's time for something different and better and faster and really solve all the audio problems from the 90s. So I want to do that.
I love the vision. And Emil, how about we have you back on another episode, and insoundz will be the Dolby of audio at that point. What do you say?
Let's go. Let's go.
I love it. We'll put it on the calendar. I really enjoyed this conversation. Where can the audience learn more about you and the work of insoundz?
So yeah, please log into insoundz.com. You can try out the product. If you're a business or any enterprise and you want to integrate that as part of your business, shout out, give us a call, contact via email, anywhere. And that's it. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, great work. Thanks for hanging out and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
That's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.